God made man and put him in a garden. The first murderer, Cain, made the first city, Enoch. And since then, we men in this fallen world have been living in cities. In fact, here in America, and many other places I would surmise, the vast majority of humans live in cities. So today, on Gunfighter Life, we're going to talk about urban survival firearms. The right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. On that note, I'm going to put in a quick reference of that first-hand experience. If you want more about me and my bio, you can check out goodshepherdtraining.com. I'm going to put in a quick bio here, then we'll get into this topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Melito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Urban survival firearms. I'm going to be honest, I'm looking forward to this episode. This came out of Alpha Male Podcast, an episode on urban survival, other than the firearms, all the other things that go into that. If you're not subscribed to both, maybe reconsider your life and think about subscribing to Alpha Male Podcast. Or go check out that episode on urban survival. This episode is just going to be talking about the guns, the firearms, maybe some other accessories that go along with them. And this is the kind of thing I like to talk about. This is one of the reasons I got into podcasting. I like episodes like this from other content creators in the past, and therefore it stands the reason I would like doing them. Let's talk about it. And I was struggling with where to start, but I think I'm going to start with the handgun. One of the patrons wisely submitted a question. Would I forego the handgun and the magazines for the handgun to have more magazines and ammo for just my long gun of choice? And I thought about that, and it's a good question, and you may decide differently. But I decided no. I would certainly want a handgun. That's it. I would want a handgun. Even for myself, who, if you listen to the bio, for most of my adult life, I've been a professional gunfighter in one way or another. And it stands to reason, likely in an apocalyptic scenario, I would likewise be that in some manner. Now, that depends on God and what He wants me to do, but preaching and gunfighting is what I do. It stands to reason I would be doing that after a pretty bad scenario. That being said, even when I do that professionally, that's not what I do all the time. The vast majority of time, even if you're employed as a professional gunfighter, you're not always in a gunfight. That's not sustainable. What about all the other time? What about all the other times when you're not doing that, but you still want to be armed? The same reason we carry a concealed carry firearm day to day. We want to not be really inconvenienced with carrying a long gun, but we also want a firearm ready to go in case we need it. Now, handguns are nowhere near as good and effective as long guns. Just period. In almost any scenario, a long gun is better. But it's way less convenient. What if I'm doing other things? What if I'm loading and unloading cargo? Even if I had a rifle slung on my back, it's not going to be that fast to get to compared to a handgun in a holster. What if I'm carrying a small child? What if you're gardening, pulling potatoes in your little backyard urban survival garden? What if you're hauling water? Because trust me, in a grid down scenario, as somebody that spends time living off grid as a modern day neo-nomad, hauling water is absolutely a thing. And when you're hauling 40 or more gallons of water at a time, it's pretty inconvenient to have a long gun. But still nice to have a handgun. And there's so many other scenarios that I could think of where you would want a handgun. And certainly you can probably think of many where you would want a handgun. Also, even if you have a long gun, if that long gun runs out, in military and law enforcement, transitions are a thing. Transitioning from long gun to handgun, that's a real thing. It's good to have a backup in many situations, especially in this kind of grid down situation. Now I'm going to talk about which handguns I think are good choices. However, I guess instead of putting the cart before the horse, I should describe what this apocalypse scenario might be like in a big city. So we can kind of talk about the parameters. I'm not talking about zombies running around. I'm not talking about parachuting Cubans, and having to pee in radiators. Let's talk some kind of worldwide disaster. And I'm not going to pin that down like doomsday preppers. Like, I'm prepping for the next swine flu of 2024 that's coming. Like, I don't know what it's going to be, right? Nobody knows the day or the hour, the Bible says, but it says to watch and be ready. But let's say there is a big catastrophe worldwide. Let's forget the cause and go to the effects. Let's say it's a city of 2 million people initially where you're at. And just bear with me in this scenario. I have read several accounts of where human populations have dropped, by some estimations, at up to 90%. Now, every death that we had from COVID is a tragedy. If they actually died from COVID, or whatever human death is caused by, every single individual one of those is a tragedy. Human life is precious. However, we're talking, I believe, less than 1%. Imagine if 90% of the population just went away for whatever reason. Famine, disease, pestilence, genocide, whatever the case is. Maybe it's a result of the grid going down. You may be familiar with a study done by the CDC that estimated if the grid went down for a year, up to 90% of the population may die. And I hope that never happens. But there's been several instances where 90% is not a crazy number. So let's say in this scenario, this city of 2 million people went to 200,000. Let's say for whatever reason, work, family, opportunity, you've decided to stay in this city. Likewise, in this scenario, there would be no power. There may be small amounts of gasoline, depending on however long it goes. Because unlike a lot of popular post-apocalyptic TV shows and things like that, gasoline doesn't last forever. 6 months, a year, maybe. If there's not people running the refineries, and how many of you and I know how to run an oil refinery? Not me. And I assume that relies on the grid, which you're probably not going to have. So let's assume maybe there's a little bit of gas in the beginning, but it's a precious resource. The economy is a barter economy. Like, nobody cares about the greenback. Nobody cares about the US dollar in this scenario. It's tradable goods. Maybe silver and gold has some value, but a barter economy. Food for food, labor for food, medical supplies, ammunition, things like that. A barter economy. That's the scenario I'm going to lay out just for a thought experiment. And let's hope and pray that we don't have to deal with that. But in that scenario, in this city, going back to handguns, what would be a good choice for a handgun? Well, I'm going to go with full-size fighting handguns. this is not likely a scenario, and I'm not saying you shouldn't conceal carry, but this I think is really a scenario where you should dress around the gun if you want to conceal carry in this environment. And you may want to, right? You may not want to be a target. Depending on what your job is and what you're doing, maybe you do want to be a hard target and visible with your firearm. As somebody that conceal carries a full-size fighting handgun most days in a normal, not grid down scenario, I can tell you it's not a crazy thing to do. In this scenario, I certainly would want a full-size fighting handgun. And this is going to make some people very happy. You'll know if you've listened, I am not a Glock fanboy. Maybe you are. If you are, a good choice for this, Napoleon Dynamite sigh there. So, the Glock 17 would be a good choice for this. It's a good full-size fighting handgun. If you're talking about a grid-down scenario, like a true scenario where what you have is what you have, you may be able to find some spare parts for handguns or something like that. But the Glock 17 is known for being very forgiving of neglect. And in this scenario, where you need a handgun to work, that's a pretty good choice. Now, there's a lot of cons to the Glock, the strange grip angle and the lackluster trigger, but I think in this scenario, the Glock 17 would be a good choice. And the Glock 19 would be a slightly less good choice in my opinion. The 19X, the Glock 17L, the Glock 34, those would be decent choices in this scenario. Good quality magazines, good quality gun. Again, it's known for running in adverse conditions with lack of maintenance. And this is a scenario where that really might shine. So that would be a really good choice for a full-size fighting handgun. Also, for a good choice, the Beretta 92. I think it's the finest combat handgun ever made. Period. A lot of people will disagree with that. I did a whole episode on that if you want to go look it up. But I think it is. And it's also very common. Not as common as Glock, but very common. A lot of police, a lot of military, for a long time used that gun. And they are not hen's teeth to find spare parts for and things like that. And they are also known for running very well in adverse conditions. I mean, they served our armed forces since the 1980s and just recently got replaced. I think they're a fantastic choice. I think they are much more shootable. They have much better triggers. They have in my opinion, better operating system. They have a big advantage in that, unlike that tilting barrel system, in my experience, they tend to shoot different grain weights and velocities of ammo to a very similar point of aim, point of impact because of that linear barrel travel. And although not usually stated, I think that's a huge advantage in an environment where you may just be getting whatever ammo you can get. And all the ammo in the world doesn't really help you if it doesn't shoot where you're aiming. The point of shooting is to hit a given target. And if you can't do that, it's kind of a moot point. I like that falling locking block system rather than a tilting barrel system. I think it's a superior system. I think the Beretta 92 would be a fantastic choice. Also, I think the competitor to that also passed the endurance trials, the SIG 226, would be a good choice. And the replacement for the Beretta 92. The gun that it took me a long time to warm up to, but that I actually think is a good handgun. The SIG M17 and 320 in a full-size guise, any of those. The longer we go in this period where that is the U.S. military's handgun, I think the more of those are going to be made and created and the more common they're going to be. And they're already pretty common. So I think any of those, good, proven, reliable, and I think that is the litmus test here that we should use for a urban survival handgun. Full size, making it more shootable for you. You can get a more effective combat handgun. Full size. Reliable. Common, proven, street proven, battlefield proven, handgun. Those are going to be my top choices. Now, if I didn't mention yours and you really like and you compete with your Smith & Wesson M&P, it's a great handgun, or any other full-size fighting handgun. You decide you want to go the 45 route and you're sticking to the 1911. It's a good full-size fighting handgun. Certainly combat proven, but a full-size fighting handgun that is proven, reliable. Not the next latest and greatest thing, not the Rock Island Armory thing that just came out, not the Lago Alien. A good, proven, dependable, reliable, longevity handgun, because this handgun might be the handgun that you have, and it's going to have to last you a while. Because in a scenario like this, I don't think the lights are going to get flipped back on and people are going to be going through a McDonald's drive-thru, even if they probably shouldn't be anyway, in the next couple of weeks, right? It's a prolonged collapse. So in that scenario, I think longevity and dependability and reliability are a big thing. Now, you may differ depending on your job or whatever, but really strong side belt carry has been established for a long time as the go-to primary carry position. I would recommend that in this. And you could carry open or concealed. That's really easy to do with a cover garment, but that, and you would probably want at least 2 spare magazines. You may want more, but if this is your only gun, you certainly would want more magazines than that, but this is probably a backup to your long gun. And that's a good transition for long gun. So long guns. If you've listened, you'll know that my one long gun with no other caveats in an apocalyptic scenario is going to be a shotgun. This is a caveat. This is an urban survival scenario. So that might change. As much as I love the shotgun, one thing that I love about the shotgun is its ability to hunt pretty much anything in North America. You can hunt a mourning dove, you can hunt a pigeon, you can take out a charging grizzly bear. In fact, it's what a lot of guides in grizzly bear country use, is a 12 gauge with slugs. It is a devastating weapon and capable of hunting all manner of beast. That said, in an urban survival scenario, there's not a lot there running around that I would consider food. There is some. Pigeons, mourning doves, Eurasian collared doves. You may have to do animal defense, but that might be from packs of feral dogs, which I could foresee being a thing in this kind of scenario. Nothing really big like a grizzly bear, and you're probably not hunting deer or elk. If you've decided my job, my calling is to be here in this city for family, for friends, for rebuilding society, for whatever the case is, you're in this urban survival scenario, then a lot of what I like about the shotgun, the ability to go out in the wilderness and feed myself, that goes away. Now, there are some urban shotgun advantages. One, breaching. If you have breaching rounds and know how to use them, you kind of have a master key. I'm going to play the advocate on that. Most doors, commercial, residential, you can just kick in as somebody that's been a professional door kicker and an urban warfare instructor. Most doors I don't need a breaching shotgun for. Most doors I can just kick in. You would be amazed. Or I can just take a sledgehammer or bolt cutters. And in a scenario where ammo is precious, probably don't want to go around blowing open a lot of doors. But it is a capability of the urban survival shotgun. Breaching, especially when you're in a hurry, can be a big advantage. So there's that. You have breaching. Also, not to be understated, you have signaling. If you have signaling rounds for your shotgun, that can be a huge advantage where there's no electronic communications. Maybe there's like ham radio. I'll be honest, I know very little about ham radio, and I'm probably not going to be a ham radio operator. I'm probably not running around with a giant ham radio on my back. So the ability to signal, if I'm the leader or not, if I'm a scout and I need to signal a bigger element, a larger element, the ability to signal can be absolutely done with a shotgun and signaling rounds. Those exist. If you have those and are going to run those, that's a big advantage. Here also is an advantage. Less lethal. Now certainly there's times for less lethal, and even in a post-collapse scenario, you may want a time where you want to project force, but not lethal force for whatever reason. So there's that. And here, is an advantage. The longer this goes on and the harder ammo is to get, I can reload shotgun. You might say big deal. I can reload pretty much any center fire round. And you can with smokeless powder. However, the 12 gauge shotgun has been around since black powder days. And I can absolutely reload a shotgun shell myself with black powder and pretty much a small nail. Can reuse primers. I know how to make priming compound. I know how to make black powder. Now, I'm not going to tell you on this podcast how to make black powder. However, you absolutely can do it. It's 3 simple ingredients in the right ratio. I don't even know that it's illegal, but I'm probably not going to tell you how to make black powder on this podcast. But I could absolutely make black powder. And I could reload a shotgun shell with new priming compound, which again is not hard to make or come by and can certainly be done reusing with a nail, pounding that primer back out and filling it with priming compound and filling it with black powder. Then maybe a piece of old t-shirt or a wooden plug, and then filling it with small gravel or melting down old wheel weights, which are probably pretty common in a city, or an old car battery to get the lead out, and making my own projectiles, dropping them in water to form balls. If you don't know, that's how shotgun shot is generally made. They drop it through the air and it rolls around and forms a ball and then falls into water and cools. All that stuff you can do yourself. So the longer this goes on and the more precious ammo gets, maybe I save my really good buckshot for if I do have to kick in a door, and other stuff I can make my own ammo. That's a giant advantage here for the shotgun. It's a low, pressure round compared to most other center fire rounds, and I can make all kinds of ammo myself for it. That's a big advantage. But it's not even the biggest advantage in an urban survival scenario. The shotgun is an amazing CQB weapon. It absolutely is a devastating weapon at close range. And we're talking urban. Not that you can't get longer shots in an urban environment. You certainly can. I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. You certainly can get longer shots. But the vast majority in and around buildings are well within the 150-yard range capability of a shotgun. And they're absolutely devastating in a CQB and room clearing type environment. Almost nothing in the small arms arena rivals the devastating effect and one-shot effectiveness of buckshot, number 4 buck, double-aught buck. It's a devastating tool for CQB. And we're talking about city. You might be talking about fighting street to street, trying to take it back from some evil occupying force or from some band of criminals, murderers, people using other people's bodies without their consent, whatever the case might be. Look at active shooter scenarios today, sadly. How many of those are at close range or inside buildings where the good guys have to go in and take out the bad guy? What are the distances in those? Shotgun is a good choice for that. In fact, I mentioned some more specialized assignments or even regular assignments as a police officer. I often had access to many different weapons, including fully auto carbines. Oftentimes, what I would take with me going into a building was a 12 gauge. Why? Best tool for the job. I didn't care what was Instagram-y. I didn't care what looked super cool. I cared what was gonna, by the provision of God, keep me breathing when I got to the other side of that building. And logically, most of the time, that was a shotgun. So I think it's still a great choice. However, it might not be the best choice in an urban survival scenario. I said a lot of the things that make the shotgun great go away. There's still many that remain. However, in this scenario, do I have like a base camp with a tribe where we have a place where we go back all the time? And even if so, what if that place gets overrun or catches fire? If fire departments go away and people are heating their buildings however they can, fires become a thing where they don't just burn one building. They may burn entire blocks or entire sections of cities or entire cities, like the Great Chicago Fire. Without a functioning fire department, without water pressure, may you have to leave that area and carry whatever you can carry. In which case, shotgun ammo is heavy. That is one of the big downsides of shotgun ammo. It is heavy. I could with other things that I need, water purification, medicine, tourniquet, sleep system, just to name a few, I maybe could carry 100 rounds of shotgun ammo, which is quite a bit, especially if I can reload as I go. However, I can carry a lot more 22 ammo. And this is kind of a big debate in the survival community. The shotgun versus the 22 for your one kind of long gun. And I keep going back to the 22. I've been thinking about this episode in my head for a while, and I keep going back to the 22. I certainly would want a 22. I don't think I would want it for my go-to if I were a professional gunfighter in this scenario. However, if I wasn't, if I was something else, perhaps it might be my primary. The big advantage of the 22 is the ability to carry a lot of ammo. I mentioned I could carry 100 rounds. I can carry 1,000 rounds of 22 in a pair of pants. If I have pants like I'm wearing right now with cargo pockets, I'm wearing like cotton canvas pants that I got at, I think, one of the like ranch supply places in Idaho. I could grab 2 bricks of 22, 1,000 rounds, and dump them in my cargo pockets, and I can have a weapon and 1,000 rounds. If I was judicious, maybe more than I would need in my entire lifetime in my pants. Forget about a pack. Now, that's not how I would want to carry it. It's kind of hard to run with 1,000 rounds, I would imagine, in your cargo pockets. But you get the point. I could easily carry 2,000 rounds in a pack. Easily. Far more than I would probably ever need. That's the giant advantage of the 22. And you may decide that it outshines all the disadvantages of the 22. Its lack of power, its lack of killing capability. Talked about things that I would consider food per the Bible, per Leviticus, things that I would actually want to eat. Things like birds in the city. 22 will certainly do that. If you're talking about urban scavenging of small game, the 22 is known for being a good small game round. Also, maybe a giant advantage depending on permissiveness of environment, even if, county, city codes no longer apply for discharge of a firearm. You just may not want to give away your position. You can run things like CB caps, Calibris, 22 shorts that are very quiet without a suppressor in a 22. That's a big advantage right there. So I think I would want a 22. I wouldn't want it as my primary, but I would want one in my pack. Something like a lightweight 22 handgun with several hundred rounds just in my pack. If I did have to flee, if our building was burning, if we did get overrun, I had to start fresh, a different part of the city or a burned out city, I could have a weapon and a couple of 100 rounds of ammunition that didn't weigh very much, in addition to my go-to fighting weapon, sidearm. I would have a 22 with some ammo in reserve. And if things got really bad, I could trade it off, because that's a tertiary weapon for me. I have a primary, I have a backup. I could barter with the 22 ammo. It's likely worth more than silver and gold in this scenario. So why not have some of it to barter? It would be silly to kind of have the ammo, I think, and not have a weapon to shoot it. So I think a 22 handgun makes a lot of sense. If you're a good handgun shooter, you certainly could still take pigeons and doves and things like that to supplement your diet with said weapon and not waste the probably more precious centerfire ammo. So a good 22 handgun, a good 22 revolver, that didn't weigh very much, absolutely, I think would be a good decision. Again, if you wanted it as your primary, really the Ruger 10/22 outshines pretty much everything else in my opinion. Upgrade it how you see fit. Maybe you can go with a more Gucci version of that, like a Volquartsen. But that would be a phenomenal choice, again, for ammo capability. The ability to carry a lot of ammo. Also the takedown versions where you can put it in a pack. If you don't want to be a target, if you just want a regular backpack and look like a refugee like many other people in the city, but you want the ability to have a long gun if you should need one if things get really hairy, that's a good choice. Also, depending on your pack, I have a Savage Rascal. It's a very cheap and inexpensive gun I use for marksmanship training and training youth because it's a lightweight gun. I use it for like youth classes. And I think it's a great choice here because it weighs less than 3 pounds. And it's not technically a takedown, but it's, I think, 1 screw, maybe 2, and you can disassemble it. I could likewise put that in a pack. 3 pounds with a couple of hundred rounds, maybe 5 pounds of extra weight. And that gives me a lot of extra hunting capability. Now, it's single shot, but it's lightweight, it's small, it's compact, and it's a rifle. So I'd probably go the handgun route, but if you wanted a lightweight route, you could go that route. Also, the AR-7s are kind of made for this. They float, which could be a big deal depending on your environment and how you might plan to bug out of a city. Or if you have to get out and maybe bridges aren't a thing, or bridges are being, let's say, heavily tolled by armed people and you want to avoid that. The ability to go in its own stock and float and be pretty lightweight, you might consider something like an AR-7 in this scenario. A pretty cool gun for this. Again, they're not heavy. And those are semi-automatic, so that wouldn't be a bad choice. I think the 1022 in most scenarios would be a better one if it's your primary long gun. But if it's not, if it's just a tertiary gun, you might consider it. Also, a big advantage, if it was a tertiary gun, you would have a way to arm somebody else. For 22 handguns, a revolver makes a lot of sense. Something like a Ruger, whether it's the newer polymer ones, or like a classic GP100, or any of those. I would prefer a double action, but even a single action would work. But any good, dependable, Smith & Wesson 617, I think, is the model that's a 22, made to the same quality as their centerfire revolvers. But any good quality revolver, the big advantage there being, in good times, 22 ammo is not known for being the most reliable, let alone years after a collapse where moisture and dirt and debris are a thing. If it doesn't fire, you can just pull the trigger again. That's a pretty big advantage. But also, there's a lot of good semi-autos. I can recommend none better than Ruger's, the Mark 1, 2, 3, or 4. 4s being much easier to clean, but a great choice there. Browning Buckmark, things like it. Anything like that would be a good choice. What about the fighting rifle? What about the fighting rifle? The quintessential rifle, the one that you're probably going to see in Hollywood movies about this. So of these, for the same reasons I mentioned the Glock being a good choice, begrudgingly, but honestly, be a good choice, the AK-47 would be a great choice for this. Why? It's known for being reliable with or without maintenance. There are places in Africa with people running AKs that maybe have never seen any maintenance. And who knows how many decades old they are. And they're still running. So, I think they'd be a good choice here. Caveat, if it's an actual military quality AK. Because many of the ones we have today are pretty cheap knockoffs. If it starts out as a cheap, unreliable knockoff, it's only going to get worse as things get worse. So don't think just because it looks like an AK, it is an AK. Just like don't think just because something takes Glock mags, it's a Glock. But there are some really good AK variants that have been brought to the US market in, the past 50 years. If you have one of those, a proven, reliable, put together by people who knew what they were doing, AK variant, it's a great choice. It's a great round. Again, it's very forgiving of neglect. That 7.62x39 is just, in my opinion, probably the best intermediate cartridge ever mass produced. I don't advise Full Metal Jacket for defense, but in this scenario, whatever caliber you have, it's likely you may come across some Full Metal Jacket. And I would submit that Full Metal Jacket in this round is likely better than Full Metal Jacket in 5.56, its big competitor. But the AK, certainly a good choice for this. Look at its track record around the world, and that pretty much should rest the case that the AK is effective. Now here in America, we love the AR-15. America's rifle. What about that in this scenario? Well, the AR-15, unlike the AK-47, is not known for going long periods well with neglect. It is kind of a high maintenance gun, especially as far as fighting rifles go. I think it's a great rifle for law enforcement, for CONUS operations, continental U.S., when things are clean, when things are running smooth, when you can have a jug of CLP and a box of Q-tips, a good chamber brush, and the time to clean it and maintain it. As any former Marine or soldier will tell you how much they get pounded into them, the importance of maintaining that rifle. It has to be maintained. And even then, it's not known for great reliability. So it's an option. The big advantage of the AR is the ammunition is lighter. The magazines themselves are lighter. An AK magazine is pretty heavy, even unloaded. A AR-15, if you're talking about the 5.56 versions, are quite a bit lighter as far as ammo goes. The rifle itself, yeah, may be a little bit lighter, depending on the configuration, maybe not, but the ammo certainly is lighter. And if we're talking about carrying the ammo on you, that is a big advantage, right? You can carry more ammo. Also, just like it's not known for reliability, one of the downsides, the AR, the 5.56 round, is not really known for being a great man-stopping round. It's certainly better than a handgun. But as far as the other choices go, it's not really known for that. It's known for sometimes taking multiple hits to disable an attacker. So can you carry more ammo? Yes. But you also may likely need more ammo. Would you rather be able to carry 60 rounds and shoot somebody once with a 7.62 39, or carry 100 rounds and have to shoot somebody 3 times with a 5.56? So I'm not saying it's a better or worse choice. I'm just throwing it out there. I think for normal operations, honestly, the AR is a better choice. But for this kind of scenario, the AK poses many, many advantages. Now let's talk about the full-size fighting rifle, not the intermediate cartridges that have come to dominate the battlefield since the Cold War. Let's talk about full-size. And when you say full-size, really one round outshines most others. The 7.62 by 51 NATO, or colloquially in the civilian version known as the 308. It's a good round. It is, I would say, as far as mass production goes, the most versatile, well-rounded fighting rifle round and hunting round. It's the best crossover round, period. It's a phenomenal choice. So, with that being said, what are some good choices in that? Well, a good semi-auto. Semi-automatic is a giant advantage as far as firepower goes. The AR-10s have a lot of disadvantages, and they have the same kind of issues that the AR-15 does. But there are many semi-automatics that are 308. The probably oldest that's still viable version of this is the M1As, the M14 clones. There's all different variants of this. The big disadvantage there is they're a heavy gun. You also have the FALs, if you can still find one of those kicking around. They're certainly battle proven. If you have the money, the SCAR, just did a whole episode on the SCAR. It's a phenomenal fighting rifle, and unlike many of the others in this category, it's not heavy. It's under 8 pounds for a full-size 308 fighting rifle. If I was going to pick one rifle, if I wasn't going with a shotgun, if I was going with a rifle, for me it would be my SCAR 17, period. Unless you gave me some other crazy caveats. But in general, it would be the SCAR 17. It's a great rifle. Some other good choices. The Galil. Now, the Galil is a really good AK variant, but they do beef it up to 7.62 by 51, 308. It is a phenomenal choice. It would be a great choice for this. It's got that AK proven reliability. It's a phenomenal weapon. And the 7.62 by 51 version would be a great choice for this. And backing up a little bit, any of the other choices, if you decided you want a 5.56 or 7.62 by 39, the Galil would be a good choice in that. I did a whole episode on the Galil Ace. You may want to go and look up. Phenomenal. In fact, I'll try and put a link to some of these episodes in the show notes. But that Galil in 7.62 by 51, a great choice for this. And quite a bit less expensive than the SCAR. Also, a good bolt-action rifle. Now, I would prefer a semi-automatic, but the advantages of the bolt-action rifle are they're simple to operate. They're dependable. If it's a good design, they have very few moving parts. And they're manually operated, meaning if you have some ammo that is not really up to spec, that's not going to cycle the action, since you manually cycle the action, that really has some advantages. Talking about good choices, the Scout rifle is kind of touted as your one rifle if you could only have one rifle. And I think that's a good choice. The Scout rifle, the Ruger Scout rifle, the Steyr Scout rifle. There are many other Scout rifles in 7.62 by 51, and I think Jeff Cooper wisely settled on that round. Do it most around. No round will really do it all, but do it most around. It's a good choice. The Scout rifle would be a good choice. And there are several battle rifles, like for the battlefield, that were designed. The Ishapur, which if you don't know is kind of a copy of the Lee Enfield, which is kind of known throughout bolt-action rifle circles as being a very fast and certainly battle-proven bolt-action design. The Ishapurs are in .308. And they're not crazy expensive, at least last I checked. They're certainly much less expensive than many other options that we talked about here today, and certainly reliable. So if you're looking for a budget option for a full-size battle rifle, granted it is bolt action, that's a little bit antiquated. However, a good solid choice. Good, robust iron sights. The disadvantage there, I don't know how easy they are to mount optics on, but a good choice, and it's in .308, a commonly available ammunition. I think those are going to be our main choices. A couple of honorable mentions, and I think this also came out of the Patreon chat, although I can't remember who mentioned it, but a PCC, a pistol caliber carbine. There is a lot to be said for ammunition compatibility. If you want your full-size fighting handgun, the obvious choice 9mm, why not go with a 9mm PCC? Not as powerful, not as effective as even 7.62 by 39 or 5.56, but certainly effective. Whatever power you get out of the handgun, you're almost certainly going to get more with the longer barrel out of the PCC. And the big advantage is they're much, much easier to shoot. It's much easier to shoot and get hits for most people at most distances, common defensive distances, with a long gun than a handgun. So the PCC, I think, should be mentioned. There are a lot of really good ones out there. This made a lot more sense when the pistol brace thing was kind of legitimate and you could just have one and run one, because it gave you a small, handy, compact gun. Although, I guess in this scenario that wouldn't really matter. But a PCC absolutely is a good choice. And kind of coming out of left field, another good solid choice would be the 357-38 Special. Now this would be in a lever gun, but you could also have your handgun in the same thing. And 357 is kind of, in the pistol world, in my opinion, like the .308. It's the best, most versatile round. It's a great defensive round, and it's also a competent hunting round at reasonable ranges. Now, far less range than a .308, but inside 100 yards on medium-sized game, it's a good round. And it's known for being a great defensive round out of a handgun. Likewise, both those options should also fire .38 Special. So you get a lot of flexibility there if you're talking about you're going to get whatever ammo you can get. You might decide you want to go, medium-sized revolver and a PCC chambered in .38 Special 357 Magnum. Also, the .38 Special, likewise, can be loaded with black powder, and since it'd be in a revolver and in a lever action, you're manually cycling it, so it should work just fine. It's going to get a little bit dirtier, a little bit faster, but you certainly could make your own black powder and reload your own ammunition. A little bit more complex than with the shotgun, because you're going to have a bullet mold, but assuming you have a bullet mold, absolutely could scrounge for some old wheel weights or melt down an old car battery, make sure you're upwind, and salvage some lead and make ammunition. And not only would it fire, because you could do that with .308 and it would probably fire, but it would actually work and function for more than one shot in the weapon. So that's another kind of outlier that might be a good choice for you. Now let's briefly talk about optics. I kind of have a general rule, even in good times. I don't like batteries. I'll use them. I probably would want a white light on my go-to fighting rifle just while I have it, and when it ran out, I would get rid of it. But if electricity is not a thing, you may be able to scrounge batteries for a while, but are you really going to be able to find 1632s or 18650s or whatever specialty battery a lot of these things take? So if you do want the battery route, I would really recommend a common battery for an optic, a AA, something like that. If you absolutely must, and I would absolutely have a backup way to shoot that gun, like backup iron sights, co-witness backup iron sights. Also, HoloSun, if you are not aware, they make several optics that have solar backup. Also, Trijicon. You might know them from their ACOG, Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight, I do believe is what that stands for. Use those in Iraq. I use Trijicon on a lot of my go-to fighting weapons. My CCW gun right now has a Trijicon RMR with that same technology. It uses tritium and fiber optic. Now, radiation doesn't last forever, but it lasts a long time and it has a half-life. So even in, let's say, 12 years, it will still be bright. It just won't be as bright as it is today. And as long as there's ambient light, sunlight, things like that, it should still illuminate. And they'll last a long time. That being said, I would still have backup iron sights. Still like backup iron sights for even day-to-day stuff. You can break things. You can break optics. But if I'm recommending optics for this, I would say get solar backup or get something that doesn't require batteries. Just a scope, like a good LPVO would be a good choice. That doesn't take batteries. I would recommend also having backup iron sights. I recommend that day-to-day anyway for a fighting weapon. I certainly would double down on that for an apocalypse, urban survival firearm post-collapse. The tactical tip of the day is something that also came up out of the Patreon chat. And I think perhaps maybe I should do a short YouTube video on this. It might come across better in video. However, somebody was asking about shooting quietly with a 22 and shooting 22 shorts, and I recommended CB caps and Calibris, which if you don't know what they are, he didn't, so maybe you don't. Go look up about 22 shorts and Calibris. Now, the vast majority of 22s I think out there, rifles, are semi-automatic. These probably won't cycle most semi-automatics. That doesn't mean you can't shoot them out of your weapon, especially for a hunting scenario where you may only want 1 or 2 shots. Let's stick with the 10-22 since it's very, very common. You can single load these. Put 1 round of a 22 short or CB cap or Calibri in a magazine. Pull the bolt back and let it go, chambering that round. Now take the magazine out of that weapon and load 1 more round in the magazine. If you're hunting, you can shoot 1 round of that 22 short very quietly, or a CB cap even quieter. Totally legally, without a suppressor. You can then run that charging handle if the round did not eject itself, but I would recommend just running it once or twice anyway, pretty quick. And since there's no magazine in there, most of anything should either come out the side or out of the bottom. You then insert the fresh magazine with 1 round and then run the bolt again, or the charging handle, depending on whatever vernacular you want in that 10-22. Now, if you're specifically going to go out and hunt with 22 shorts or CB caps, you may want to consider a lever action or a bolt action rifle. But if you have a 10-22 and you're mostly going to hunt with regular ammo, but you may want to take 1 or 2 really quiet shots, don't think that you need some fancy gun or to spend a bunch of money on a really high-powered air rifle. Because what I just described, although not the fastest, is probably faster than most of the break-open pump that are going to have about the same amount of power as the 22 short is. So that's your tactical tip of the day on shooting quiet with a Ruger 10-22. Load a single round, take the magazine out, have 1 round in reserve. You can do that with multiple magazines if you have multiple magazines. Sometimes on small game you'll get multiple shots, multiple small game, or you'll have to do a follow-up shot. So having 1 ready is kind of handy. You can absolutely single load a round. Also just take it out and drop it in the chamber and let the bolt go forward. Again, not the fastest, but it's certainly a viable option for firing rounds and cycling quiet ammunition in a Ruger 10-22. That's your tactical tip of the day. The verse of the day. Now, in keeping with quiet, this is, I think, is a very fitting verse, and this is one that I had read last night and took a screenshot of so that I could share it. That you also aspire to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you. That you aspire to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you. That you may walk properly toward those who are outside, and that you may lack nothing. A good verse, and some good advice on how to live our lives. Whether things are quote-unquote normal, as I would submit that the culture we live in today is not normal. However, whether things are as they are today or they drastically change in the future, that's still good, sound advice. That you also aspire to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your own hands. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.